We're going to talk about the law of self-defense. So I think this is a really under talked about conversation. Um, and you were in law enforcement. You were a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what you got here.
Okay. So, um, going back to the former slide,
Oh yeah.
there's a little piece in there. So reasonable mistakes are allowed. When we're thinking about the law of self-defense, you are allowed to make a mistake. You don't have to be perfect,
Hmm.
but the law is fairly unforgiving for the wrong kinds of mistakes.
Okay.
Um, and for the audience, I was both a defense attorney and a prosecutor. And so the only law that I've ever practiced has been criminal law.
Oh, I didn't know you were on both sides of the table
Yeah,
there. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I was a defense attorney before I was hired as a prosecutor.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, so the law is, and this is the law in all 50 states.
Okay.
Um, and I no longer practice law. So if you want to know about your own state, you should consult a lawyer.
Okay.
Um, but
Because to clarify, like there's shades of what we're talking about. There's shades of um there it might be one way in one state and different in another. Like these are generally, but how they interpret them maybe might be different. Is that
exactly.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
with that caveat.
This is a good, solid general rule.
Okay.
But how the individual words are interpreted could be slightly different. So the threat has to be imminent, and imminent means two different things.
Hmm.
Imminent is a span of time, but it's also a span in terms of space. And so if somebody is, I used to say in my classroom, if I was up front in the classroom and I say, imagine somebody just walked in the door, and the doors are always in the back of the classroom from where the teacher stands.
Hmm.
Somebody just walked in this classroom and they're really mad at me and they raise their fist and go, I'm going to punch you right now. There's no imminent threat because their fist can't reach that far,
Right.
right? If they drew a gun and said, I'm going to shoot you right now, well, the bullet could travel that distance. And so the distance isn't as relevant for a gun, but it's very relevant for a knife, and it's even more relevant for a fist.
Right.
And so the imminent means that it's possible that it's going to actually happen, and there's a time span, which is how we normally think of imminent. It can actually happen because it could physically happen. It's close enough physically, and it can happen in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
If the
Yes.
person
Yes.
came in and said, oh, well, it is 12:45, and at 12:50, I'm going to walk to the front of the classroom and punch you. There's no imminence there at all,
Mm.
even if they were standing right in front of me.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
So that's that first piece.
Okay.
Um,
Well,
then the
I'll pull
Yeah,
it up to look at what so folks can see what we have next. So the eminence,
yep.
proportionate. Yeah. What you
So
got?
so the response must be proportionate, and this is the rule for non-deadly force. For deadly force, we don't have this rule, but I'll explain that later. For non-deadly force, so if somebody walks up to you and spits in your face,
Hmm.
does that mean the only thing you can do is spit back in their face? No, we're kind of too civilized to make that be the rule.
Okay.
So if somebody spits in your face, you could slap them with an open hand. That would be proportionate. You could probably push them away. That would be proportionate. If you punched them in the face and broke their nose, that would not be proportionate,
Right.
right? And so the amount of force you use in response to being assaulted has to be proportionate to what happened to you.
Otherwise, you become the aggressor in the eyes of the
Exactly.
law. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you lose self-defense and you become the aggressor. If you escalate the use of force, then you become, so it becomes two separate assaults then. The person, what they did to you initially, and then your response to them, if it exceeds that proportionate level,
Yeah.
then you become a separate aggressor for a separate assault charge.
Oh, so then that's where you can kind of get into that mutual combatant
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Even though I might have picked on you first, if you respond unproportionately, I still get in trouble, but you get in trouble too, and it's not necessarily self-defense if it's not proportionate.
Exactly. I
Okay.
had a student who was very short. Oh, she was maybe 5'2" at the most. And she had a son who was maybe 16 or 17. And somebody who was big, like 6'2", 250 pounds,
Yeah.
started beating him badly.
Come on.
And the younger, smaller boy was on the ground, and this man was over top pounding him in the face. And the boy pulled a knife out of his pant pocket and stabbed the man in the belly.
Mhm.
And he went to state prison for, I don't know, 3 to 5 years for that, because the court said that the use of a knife in a fist fight was not proportionate.
Even though their size difference
Yep.
was
Yep.
such a gap. So it's not like that person in the eyes of the law proportion said, I'm going to pull a knife because you're so much bigger. The law said that's not good enough.
Yeah.
I don't really think that's fair, but okay.
I don't think it's fair
Yeah.
either. And
Yeah.
I think there might be some gray areas, like if
Okay.
you're in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
there might be some other things that would come into play, but I really strongly advise against using knives, and that's towards the end of the
Okay. Yeah. We'll get into
program.
that. And
Yep.
then you have the one more item here
Yep.
about when should we stop using deadly force
So,
or force, I should say.
so the right to use force, any force at all, ends the instant that the threat stops against you. So I used to demonstrate in front of the classroom, because I taught criminal law
Mhm.
after all this other stuff, um, that if somebody, I say, just imagine that I'm really upset with one of you, and I say, imagine I walk up to you and I bam, smack you right in the face, and before you can react, I go, boy, that felt good, and I drop my hands. You can't hit me back, because that's retaliatory, and
Mm.
my assault has stopped. I have signaled very clearly, I'm not going to hit
That
you
I'm
again.
done.
I'm done.
So I've worked with populations who are very vulnerable to violence on the street, specifically women who have been who are ending up on the street, right?
Yeah.
And that is there's a part of that where, well, if you come up and punch me and then you're like, whatever, I'm good. If that person doesn't do something, they're actually then at maybe greater risk, because then they get a reputation of being weak, or I mean, it depends on the environment, right? Like if this is a
Right.
place you'll never go again, who cares? But if it's a place you have to live, what are your thoughts there? What does someone do?
Um, it's hard.
Okay.
The truth is, it's hard. I mean, there's no easy answer to that,
Yeah.
because legally you have no right. It's no longer self-defense. Once they stop the attack, what you have to do is call the police and press charges. That's what the law says.
Right.
However impractical that might be in the neighborhood, the
Yeah.
law says you only have one option left at that point, and that's to report it and have charges pressed.
Which can open up a whole other can of worms for that
Yes, I
person.
know that. I do. I do.
Unfortunately.
Yep.
Okay. We're just discussing the law, not whether we like it or not,
Yep.
but just the way it is. So you have, I think, a second slide here on threats of deadly force. Oh, this is about deadly force
Right.
specifically.
So this is the exact same as non-deadly force, except the threat doesn't have to be proportionate. The law says that if it's deadly force, we don't care the means. And so we see sometimes a car is racing towards somebody, like in a movie or police show. Car's racing towards the officer. The officer pulls out his gun and shoots 3 bullets through the windshield and kills the driver.
Mm-hmm.
That's legal. That's a valid use, because the car itself is a deadly weapon at that point.
Okay.
And so if you're using your car as a deadly weapon, I can respond with deadly force. I don't have to.
Okay.
If somebody pulls a knife, and they're within the striking distance, I could shoot them.
Okay.
And
So it's that introduction of the weapon by the person attacking you is what changes some variables here.
exactly. And it doesn't matter what the weapon is. It could be a bat and they're swinging at your head.
Okay.
Right. If they're swinging at your knees or your shins or something, that's not deadly force. It may hurt a lot and you may be disabled, but it's not deadly force. But if they're swinging it at your head, that is deadly force, and you can use whatever means that you have available, including deadly force, to defend yourself.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We don't want you to go, folks who are listening, we don't want it to go this far.
Yeah, no, we don't. But
there are consequences, and I don't know if it's on the next slide. Oh yeah, here we go. This is exactly what I wanted to bring up, particularly for the audience that we're hoping to reach. What do you
Yeah.
have here, Erica?
So the truth is that far too many judges and police officers are transphobic.
Yeah.
Um, both are conservative occupations. I think there are areas of the country where law enforcement has made significant progress in being more LGBT friendly,
Mm-hmm.
and there are certainly some judges that are as well. But um, the odds are not good that the police officer is going to respond well. Um, so trans people are right 3 1/3 times more likely than cis people to be assaulted by the police. One of the things as a cis woman is that if it's your word against a man, mostly in society they're going to choose the man's side. Um, that men have more credibility than women in this culture, and trans women have less credibility than cis women, and so um, it almost doesn't matter what comes out of my mouth. It's not likely going to be believed, and so um,
You're less likely to be given the benefit of the doubt, is what I'm
exactly,
hearing. So,
exactly, yeah,
if you line up me, a white cisgendered woman, we line up you, a trans white woman, and then maybe I don't know what the order, but like a black woman or then a black trans, like they're
yeah,
all going to probably have different outcomes, is
yeah,
what I'm hearing,
yeah,
or a good chance of that. Okay.
yeah. I suspect that white trans women fall under black cis women.
Okay.
There's a lot of societal measures that like in that other training I did for all of you, less just balancing the numbers, right around 2% of the entire population says they could ever imagine dating a trans person, where I'm sure 18-20% of the population would say they could imagine dating a black woman or a black man.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
And so sort of the sense of, I wouldn't be caught dead with somebody who looked like me. I mean,
Mm.
about half the trans women that I've met say, I would never date another trans person. It was like, really? That's odd.
Okay.
um, but so it's internalized transphobia.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, yeah, so there's this hierarchy, and I'm quite sure that I've got more credibility than a black trans woman, but I'm also just as sure that I've got less credibility than a black cis woman.
Mm. Well, and I think I, I'm glad we're having this conversation because self-defense is not one size fits all.
Mhm.
And I learned this in my own kind of teaching experience over time. It's like things that work for me aren't, and if I say do this, then I'm not doing someone a service if they're different than me, right? Like there's a lot of privilege I have, there's privileges I don't have, but we can't assume. And so I guess my message is really for people who are either teaching or if you're on the other side of the equation, it's like keep in mind like who's telling you this stuff. It matters, right? Because there's stuff that I've learned from you that completely go under my radar and that like you've opened my eyes to so much. But then like talking to my husband, we go out for long walks, and in our relationship he's learned from me because as a white dude, there's a lot of things I'm attuned to that go under the radar. So
Yeah,
I just really want to encourage people to, when we're having these conversations, please apply what we're talking about to you specifically, as opposed to this is one size fits all. And that's
yeah,
why I wanted to have this conversation with you.
totally, totally.
Yeah. So let me pull this up. We talked about being right. Anything else on this slide?
Um, there's a really ugly statistic that trans women are um, 20-30% of trans women are raped in prison by prison guards.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's really, I think something like 80% are raped while they're in prison. Um, but 20 to 30% of those are by prison personnel. And it gives you a sense of where we stand.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's a whole other conversation. I think I'm gonna have you back to have a separate conversation about kind of society in general, things I've learned from you. But yeah, I want to today at least keep this focused on our friends who are
yeah,
trans and giving them some support.